this better or is this better? I never know.
Welcome everyone to Ready Set Cyber, a deep dive into the issues and solutions in cybersecurity. I'm Rob Miller, a fractional CRO with 25 years of experience selling SaaS software and your host for today. In the news, experts are warning Microsoft users about malicious email campaigns leveraging a phishing as a service toolkit called Rockstar 2FA. The toolkit aims to steal Microsoft 365 account credentials by means of AiTM or Adversary in the middle attacks, which bypass MFA. On last month's show, we heard it from the hackers and saw just how hackers can bypass MFA. But is all MFA created equal? Today, we're going to take a close look at how companies do better with modern solutions and vastly reduce the risk of attack. If you're joining us live and have any questions or comments for our panelists, please type them into the chat and we'll do our best to address them. If you're watching the recording, you can reach out to us via the comment section and we'll be sure to get back to you. So without further ado, let's meet our panelists. First off is Keith Spencer, CEO of TraitWare. TraitWare provides virtually phish-proof enterprise MFA plus SSO or single sign-on. We also have Chris Canfield, TraitWare's Director of Technology. And also joining us today, we're happy to have Jason Reed, CEO of Intersectus. Intersectus provides companies with business strategy, services, and IT solutions. And also Miguel Gotau, Business Systems Analyst with Intersectus as well. Welcome, everybody.
Hey,
glad to be here.
Good to be here.
Hello. Glad we're all here in the room. We have a few questions that we want to kick off with. And of course, if we have things pop up in the comments section, we'll get to them. But first, let's start off with Heath. Maybe you can tell us exactly what is Adversary in the middle and what is that attack and how does it work?
Well, I like to use older analog analogies to try to think about things. And so an adversary in the middle is if we think about, a bank in a vault and has your money and the gold and everything in it. And those got more secure after, bank robbers were trying to rob banks, et cetera. Then the threat actor, the robbers in those days, started trying to capture the gold or the money in transit, right? So they started trying to rob the wagon train or the train or the vehicle transporting the information, the data, the gold, on its way to where it was supposed to be stored, right? So if we think about an adversary in the middle in the digital world, when we go to sign into an application, a device, or whatever else it is where the gold is, an adversary in the middle is trying to capture that information en route to its destination. And really with the login attack of an adversary in the middle, they're trying to capture your credentials, your identity on its way to arrive at the front door. And if they can capture that identity in transportation to the front door, then they get to use it to get in. And, it's been said recently by lots of other people, and I've plagiarized in saying, hackers these days aren't really hacking their way in. They're just stealing the keys and then logging in. And that's what an adversary in the middle attack is in a simple view.
Got it. I like that. They're not breaking in. They're just walking right through the front door, basically.
Because they took your key.
Yes, 100%. All right, Chris, I've got a follow-on question. What unique challenges do AiTM attacks pose, and how does TraitWare's architecture overcome them?
Sure. Well, they pose a big challenge to the existing ecosystem of logins, really, right? The password, like Keith was saying, if they can steal that, if they can steal what's going to get you into that front door, well, that's a huge problem, right? That's a big problem. And of course, we at TraitWare, we've done our best to try to overcome that challenge by creating a passwordless system from the ground up, where we eliminate that password, that credential altogether. So when phishing emails come around and they're trying to grab, they're looking, somewhere to phish a credential, we don't have credentials. That's just not how our system operates, right? We use a different kind of unique system. We can get into that maybe a little bit later, but we have eliminated the password from the system, which is the weakest link, which is the human making a mistake, clicking a button, typing in the wrong thing, maybe sharing the wrong thing with the wrong person at the wrong time. And I think if we get rid of that, we've covered a huge swath of the challenge.
Yep, got it. All right, Jason, for you, from a cybersecurity consultant's perspective, why do phishing campaigns remain so effective despite advancements in MFA?
I mean, I think Chris just hit the nail on the head, right? I mean, users are still the weakest link. So I don't think that that's necessarily gonna ever go away. And I think that what we see a lot of the times is, whether it's MFA fatigue, people are like, I mean, I got so many codes and I thought I was doing something, or not even realizing that they have a system in place that doesn't allow them to stay resistant to phishing. You see some of the issues with, the way the timeouts for, one-time passcodes and things like that can be abused. There's different ways that people are, kind of leveraging these adversary in the middle attacks that, continue to stay a problem. And the other reason is, the amount of money that's involved here, right? I mean, businesses are in the business to make money, and the business of cybercrime is a booming business. So when you look at the comparative GDP, right? I mean, I think the latest stat I saw was that it's going to top about $9.5 trillion USD this year, which would make it third largest globally. So when you're looking at reasons for people and small businesses are out there thinking that, we don't know what's happening, it's like, oh, we're a small business, it's not that important for us to be secure. I would argue it's the inverse, right? Like when you are the lowest hanging fruit, you're the first one that people want to attack. So one of the reasons that we love TraitWare as the solution that we use for a number of clients is the ease of use and the simplicity around it, and the fact that we're adding so much value to their identity protection, which today, in the way that SaaS applications work, the way that all these different ecosystems are connected, your identity is really that core piece that you need to make sure that you're securing. So firewalls, all these different network security tools, super important. But if you're not securing your identity, you're really not going to stay secure throughout all of the different areas that you touch, in your organization digitally.
Right.
Yeah. Hey, I just want to add one more thing, to Jason's comment, is that, I'm a human, right? And one of the reasons we founded this company is that we're going to make mistakes, and it's impossible for us not to make a mistake someday. However, I don't think that that's our fault. And I think it's the technology that has failed us, and it shouldn't be. We should be modernizing the technology so that we don't get failed as humans. And, we're just trying to do our core competency, our jobs every day. And personally, I think it's on the technology providers, the service providers, everybody else, to do a better job to empower us as people to be safer. And we're better together. And if we're going to continue to be considered the weak link, there should be empathy for that. And how do we enable being better as people?
Absolutely. Right. It sounds like a lot of what you're describing is, taking preventative measures as opposed to remediating on the back end of a problem. Is that fair to say? I
love that concept. I love quotes from smart people, right? So when, from sports, Wayne Gretzky, skate to where the puck's going to be, not where it's at, is a way to be active and not reactive. I think a lot of businesses just get stuck in this mindset of like, I'm just trying to pay the bills every day, instead of trying to move forward. And I understand, as a person running a company, it's very difficult to work on your business when you're stuck working in your business. And I think that's why a big reason it's so important for businesses to leverage companies like Intersectus to assist them in working on the business, which will ultimately drive a way better return on investment on all of your systems, right? So it'll make it all more effective when you can get a different set of eyes on it.
Makes sense. All right, Miguel, sorry, I haven't picked on you yet, but I have a question. What was the primary driver for Intersectus to offer a phishing resistant solution like TraitWare?
Gotcha. we at Intersectors are very lucky to be working with a lot of clients in very unique situations. We are working with people that are either constantly on the move or working at remote locations. So we want to make sure that it's absolutely them. And we also want to provide, as we've already talked about, the convenience factor to this. If I add $1 for every time I've asked somebody what their password was to log in, they said they forgot or they don't remember their PIN, they can't log into their computer, I would have enough money to start my own business by now. So I'm very happy that TraitWare here is ready to kind of circumventing that, make things just way easier for everybody across all fronts. It also helps that there are a lot of controls that are very useful. Geolocation for that matter allows us to make sure that people are actually like where they're supposed to be working, and we're able to do what we need to do without getting hassled. And a lot of these other convenience factors like creating app shortcuts or so forth. So primary driver I should say is that you're making people truly safe while making it just easier for them to just do what they gotta do.
Yeah, makes sense. Jason, anything else to add? I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm curious to know if there were any other drivers from a business perspective in addition to the efficacy of the technology.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the technology has to work, right, in order to use it. So it's been awesome to kind of see the development of TraitWare over the last few years and to where it is today. I think that one of the primary drivers on top of what Miguel's comment was, it just goes back to that requirement today to make sure that your identities are staying secure. So we needed to find a way to centralize our securing identities past what we do just through the built-in things of Microsoft or Google Workspace, because as we continue to see, those are subject to being taken advantage of, right? To being hacked in some manner. And so making sure that we're doing our job as a security consultant to say, hey, these are the top things that you need to address, and make sure that those are the things that we look at first when we're in an organization, and then we can go through whatever compliance framework they may be required to do. We spend a lot of time talking with people in regulated spaces, looking at how they're doing their security gap analysis and any sort of vulnerability assessments, and helping to make sure that as the core of NIST CSF says, one of those 6 pillars is your identity, right? And now the thing they've added on recently is the governance side of it. So for us, we're taking those as kind of best practices, and we're saying, great, all businesses should align to some level of this. What is the most cost-effective and easiest way to do that through a user experience? And we've just found that TraitWare is the answer to that.
That's great. Appreciate that feedback. And it sounds to me like it's really just, as you say, it's one of the pillars, but it's a multi-layered approach. And I'm wondering if there are any other things that you recommend to your clients to get around some of these AiTM accounts, or AiTM attacks, I should say.
Yeah, I mean, I think, awareness, right? So we've got to make sure that we're doing proper training and making sure that people understand what these latest techniques are. The things like security awareness training and different ways to do that. There are some more advanced ways today that people can kind of expose themselves to what those attacks look like. And then another piece is just making sure that people are keeping their credentials and their devices secure. So we make sure that everything is known, right? So whether you're leveraging something like an Entra ID or some sort of an internal authentication system and a way to identify devices, including mobile devices, and ensuring that those logins that happen are from the people that are actually the ones that are supposed to do it. So this may be jumping ahead a little bit in our conversation, but one of the things that I think is super important for people to think about is what are those processes? Because you can have, like Keith said, hey, someone stole your key. It's right. Hey, I locked my front door, but I left my slider open all night, and I can't believe someone broke into my house. Right. Well, it's like, okay, well.
Well, for me, that would be for me, that would be the bear came in through the back door to get to the pantry.
Exactly. And so for us from our side, our responsibility is to make sure that our processes and our procedures are clear with the client, and that they understand that, hey, I don't know, I lost my phone, I had to get a new phone, whatever it is. Hey, well, now we have to take you through the process to verify your identity and make sure that you are the person that should have access into these systems. And so I think those are some of the things that we've seen that could get missed potentially, and make sure that we are able to know that, you know, we're doing our job to keep these environments secure, and make that still a pretty simple process when we do need to do recovery, as opposed to, you know, shipping out some new key fob or some other way that we could do a, you know, a secure ID, making it possible to do that in a remote situation, and with companies that we work with that are global, where we can't necessarily sit down in the same room with them and have them show us their driver's license or something, right? Like, it's just got to be user friendly today.
Yep. All right. Let's look ahead. Let's talk about the future a little bit. So, Heath, back to you. How does TraitWare handle phishing attempts that rely on stolen session cookies, which was highlighted in the Rockstar 2FA report?
Yeah, so going back to the first question that you asked me is, you know, how does an attacker try to intercept something in transit, right? So without going too far into the weeds, when a person tries to sign into something, there's a packet of information, your identity packet, right, that's transmitted across the ether of the interwebs to land at, you know, what would be termed as a relying party, right? The application or whatever you're trying to sign into is relying on that identity packet to arrive at its intended destination and then validate that login. So what the attackers are doing today is they're trying to get in the middle by either proxying or presenting to you a login page that they actually possess versus the actual real destination. They then can capture that identity at the page that they possess, and then they go and fill it in at the real page, and then they control that session. And so how TraitWare addresses this is we have the ability to create a trusted pathway, a secure pathway. So if we go back to, transporting the money and the gold in a vehicle to get it somewhere, you're putting it inside of an armored truck with armored guards to protect it the entire way to its destination, and to defend against that adversary in the middle attack. And so TraitWare achieves this in multiple ways, and protecting that flow, and then leverages standards that are out there to protect that flow. But over the years, as the threats evolve, because there's so much money at risk, as Jason mentioned, they do evolve. They continue to look for the weakest link, and the latest weakest link for most people ended up being back at the browser. And how do you trust that the browser's actually allowing the identity to only land where it should? And so TraitWare built a browser extension that creates a trusted relationship between that registered browser and the service that's supplying the identity. For us, that's the TraitWare server that's supplying the identity to the final destination. So imagine our browser extension basically functions as that armored truck in creating a security wrapper around that relationship. And Chris can probably speak to it even better than I can. I try to keep it in simple terms of, what would you relate to in the real world?
Well, there may be a follow-up to that, and this could be either for you, Heath, or Chris, but how does that browser extension you just mentioned work with Microsoft accounts?
So it works really with any accounts, but directly with Microsoft accounts. When you go to log in to a Microsoft account, either through a single sign-on portal, whether that's through our single sign-on portal, or even if you're using Okta and you're using us as Passwordless MFA in front of Okta, or Microsoft functions as an SSO provider, you can sign into your SSO portal, but it requires that the additional factors and the identity payload only are delivered to and transmitted through that trusted browser session. So instead of logging into a regular browser session, the additional factors like a one-time passcode, well, we use a one-time passcode, but we use it in a format of a QR code so that the user never enters a number, so they can't be tricked into entering a number, and it can only be read by our authenticator app. Well, that QR code can only be delivered to the trusted browser, And then the identity payload that's released from the authentication server can only return to that exact destination where that one-time code was scanned at in that session. So it basically guarantees that there's no way for someone to try to capture it in transit or at its destination of the browser.
Makes sense. The analogy might be that the adversary doesn't really know where the armored truck is or what route it's going to take that day. Fair?
Yeah, we're masking it, hiding it, and really it's almost, you know, for lack of a better term, people might understand the tunnel concept, because that's what VPNs used to do, right? They put you in a tunnel, you're inside this tunnel, only you can go through this tunnel. Well, rather than using a VPN because they create a lot of other issues, we're just creating a trusted relationship between the identity provider and the end destination of the browser, where it can only travel inside that protected boundaries.
Chris, anything that you'd like to add to that response?
I just wanted to say real quick that, yeah, you only do this, you only have to register that one time to that browser. This isn't something you have to do over and over again. So you just do it one time, you do that pairing, that binding, and you're then secure. You've got that secure channel, that secure pathway, like he's talking, that secure route from you know, one bank to the next, or wherever that gold's coming from. And then it's just like, you know, you have your phone, you scan your face on your phone, and you scan a QR code on the screen, and you're in. 1, 2, 3. It's just super simple, and that's what we've tried for. I was thinking about Miguel. He was talking about how trying to make it really easy and simple for the users, and I think Jason was saying the same thing. Just trying to make it easy, and that's what we focus on in this extension. It may sound like an additional piece, so it is an additional thing to have, but it's just as simple. We try to make everything super simple and super easy to use for the user, because we don't want them to have any friction. In fact, we want to somehow decrease friction and increase security. That's actually our goal. How do we decrease friction for a user, decrease friction for admins, and somehow increase the security? And we've actually done that.
So,
something that we really like about the web extension, you know, since we're on that topic, I mean, we're doing some testing with it in different ways, but we've seen the ability to leverage the web extension to secure a browser past what you would see kind of through that mobile application management piece of Microsoft, so that we know that the person using that browser is the one that authenticated to it. And now we can open up things that you may not want to open up traditionally on even on a personal device, right? Hey, I need someone that can check their Outlook webmail. Well, you know, historically, you don't want to open that up, right? Now you don't know who's connecting in. You don't know anyone from anywhere now could potentially log into that mailbox. Well, no, we can actually say we only allow you to access it through this secured method, and we know that that's the only way that you can do it. And so it's opened up the ability for us as a solution provider and for companies to say, hey, you have these needs that you want to be able to do for your people to make it so that they can be more efficient. We can help you do that while staying secure. And so that's something that from a development side of the TraitWare platform that we've really liked is seeing those types of things continue to come up.
Yeah.
Good to hear. Quick question. Before we talk more about securing for the future, we've got Alexandra who's chimed in on LinkedIn. We appreciate the feedback and the input, but her question is, why don't companies just use passkeys? I don't know who to throw this to, but you're all welcome to respond.
Chris can take a stab at it, and then we'll follow up.
There's so much to say. I was just wondering if anyone's going to ask about that. Okay, there's so much to say. That's an entire show or two topic. Okay. Let me preface by a few couple things. First of all, we are all in favor of standards. We're all know all about the standards behind passkeys.
Yep.
Been following it since the beginning. I was in some of the rooms when this stuff was announced and developed. I completely understand it. There are some good things about passkeys. There are some challenges about passkeys. Passkeys can now be shared. Again, there's so many rabbit holes to go down. We're not going to go down. I'll just say the big points.
Give us the top three.
Passkeys can be shared. If you don't want to share your passkeys, it can become a nightmare to manage. You got to be careful of that word, nightmare. It can become difficult to manage. And then sometimes the recommendation for what if you lose your passkey and there's recovery, the recommendation has been keep 3 or 4 passkeys around available. Again, there's so many different ways we can discuss and debate what that all means. So there are challenges. I'm in favor of it. It's going to get there. We're probably going to be involved in it. Well, we're part of the FIDO Alliance. We will be probably more intimately involved as that advances. We're watching it, but at the same time, we have created a parallel technology at roughly the same time frame, if not a month or two ahead. back in the day, a while ago. And what we offer is extremely secure. I will say that. So passkeys, they're great. They can be great. They're great for consumers. I use them as a kind of consumer use. For enterprise, a bit more challenging to manage, for recovery. We again, going back to what I said, we want to create something very simple and more secure. So trying to balance that security and simplicity, that's what we've aimed for. And I think right now what we've got, it meets that.
Yeah, I'll just add that I think, and Chris touched on this, passkeys are a huge step forward, particularly for consumer use. And I think that in that area, it's tremendously more secure. Chris mentioned recovery can be difficult. In most cases, recovery defaults back to a password, which makes that still the weak link, even if you're using a passkey. And I do believe that they are going to get better and better as they move forward. We're helping to participate, as Chris mentioned, as part of the FIDO Alliance. We've built essentially a better passkey experience that is more enterprise grade and more focused on workforce identity. So I do want to make that clear that TraitWare's product today and Deliverance today really helps with workforce identity. And for those service providers that are looking to secure their service provider direct login, we have lots of conversations going on around OEM use, particularly for B2B enterprises for that. And so, you know, those questions is someone that wants to dive deeper on passkeys and where they're going, or why TraitWare believes in what we're doing slightly adjacent to passkeys, happy to have that conversation offline, or as Chris mentioned, that's an entire another show or two.
Miguel or Jason, any additional thoughts on this particular topic?
No, I mean, I think we covered it pretty well. You know, I think the value of, you know, people seeing passkeys pop up in their, you know, their password app now on their iPhone, or if they're using some sort of a password solution, password manager, and it lets them, hey, you should make a passkey for this. You know, I think more security is good. I'm not necessarily going to say it's better, but I think it's good. I mean, it's raising awareness. It's making sure people know that, hey, passwords aren't necessarily the most secure. We should come up with a better way to do that. I think, you know, people have become very comfortable with using things like Face ID or their biometric authentication on their mobile devices now, and that's become a normal part of everyday life. So having a way to leverage that for their enterprise or their workplace identity, you know, through something like TraitWare is been great for us. And then, you know, people obviously still have other things that they do and they use right on their personal accounts, and so, you know, I think passkeys are a good step towards a better secured future for people on their personal side as well.
All right. So your opinion is it's a step, but it's maybe not all the way.
Correct.
Yeah. All right. Maybe Alexander, if you have a follow-up, or that didn't fit the bill, I think we probably can recommend to you as a follow-up other sessions that we've done regarding passkeys. And we can come back to it if we like, but I'd like to talk more about, you know, future. And Chris, I'd like to come back to you and ask you about how TraitWare is preparing to address emerging threats, you know, other things like what's come out in this Rockstar 2FA report, AI-driven phishing, advanced social engineering attacks. I mean, things that are likely to still to come.
Yeah, I mean, we're always trying to stay ahead of the pulse, or on the pulse, and then ahead of it if we can, like Keith was mentioning. Gosh, there's so much to unpackage here, from like quantum crypto kind of stuff we're looking at. Obviously, again, if you're trying to do social engineering, we can't really talk about it exactly. And it turned out to not be a social engineering situation, but someone contacted us from one of our clients recently, our customers, and we had to verify that person was who they were, because it was at an admin kind of level, right? And we have some things in place that we've done to make sure that person is not using some sort of AI generated recovery person or something like that, right? There are ways to do that. One of them, again, going back to it, is if we can get rid of a password, then no one can ask you for it, right? So no one can ask you for a thing. If we're binding a login to a particular browser, no one can ask you to sign into a different browser. Things like that, simple things. Geolocation, while not perfect, it's a good extra layer of defense. You know, that can help prevent certain things too in certain situations. Someone trying to recover, if something does slip through the cracks, maybe it doesn't slip all the way through, and someone's trying to authenticate in a place they can't authenticate to, right? So we try to add these different layers. We're always looking at what's emerging, what's coming out, and trying to get ahead of it. And what Jason said is also really important about creating your policies and having training. Training, yes, really important, but the policies that drive that training, those are also extremely important. And around identity proofing and what steps you have in place to identity proof, I think people are still getting used to the idea of that somebody can come and approach you with a false identity. I'm not just talking about like you saying, like, what if we're not in the same physical location, we can't present a driver's license? Well, we've seen some threats where some deep fakes or real fakes or whatever they're called today, AI driven fakes. How do you get around that, right? How do you get around that? We're gonna have to create new policies for identity proofing, and we're looking at some new ways to integrate that into our technology.
Yeah, and I think just to add real quick on that, TraitWare's job right now is to deliver a very extremely high assurance level that if you've been identity proofed properly and then registered to your token, your mobile device, biometrically, and then TraitWare's name is based on, each one of us has very unique trait characteristics, so unique that our process, as part of our patented process, separates you as an individual to greater than 1 in 300 billion. Just when we can prove that math out. So that's a very high assurance level that if you used this key to sign into something, we are really, really confident that it was you that did it. And so anyone that's trying to use an AI voice or AI video to mimic you, if they have to authenticate into the platform using a TraitWare secure token, the likelihood that they could achieve that to then play that they joined this meeting or whatever, it would be very difficult for them to do that in its current state. And we know it's going to evolve, and we are constantly trying to think forward on how to do that. But if you're using, behavioral biometrics in 5 or 6 different transparent, in other words, invisible factors that a threat actor, if they're unknown, they're invisible, a threat actor can't know what to capture, and you deliver them in a very secure way, it becomes extremely difficult for someone to try to fake that to sign into something.
All right, my digital twin is on notice.
Yeah.
As of right now.
Yeah.
All right, Miguel, back to you. One thing that we don't talk about maybe as much, or at least usually up front when we talk about new technologies, is deployment and change management. And I have a question for you about Intersectus, and how did you adapt to the deployment of TraitWare, which I know you've done in a number of instances, and do you have any feedback about that process?
Gotcha. I'm very thankful that TraitWare is one of the very few platforms that has extremely detailed and very easy to follow documentation. So thank you to whoever took the time to write that all out. It has made my life incredibly easy, and I've only had to pop in for questions for just very minor details. That being said, though, the entire deployment process is fantastic. It's been much more streamlined compared to when we did this, like if you say like a year ago. Our most recent one for one of our bigger clients happened pretty much like without any major issues. And anytime I had any sort of like technical questions, whatnot, it was really easy to get a hold of any of their support team. So in that sense, everything was fantastic. The only feedback I could really think of, honestly, and these are like fringe cases, right? So it's easy enough to get in touch with users one-on-one. It's easy enough to provide any public facing documentation, which with the templates are fantastic. It's easy enough to get anybody on a call and walk them through the process. The only people I can't really have any account for are the people that are classic. I don't read my emails. I don't answer phones. And all of a sudden I'm calling for help and I don't know what's happening because I've ignored basically everything coming from like either us or the internal team. What I thought might have been cool is if ever they get their registration email and they register their QR code, having some kind of like in-app tutorial that's like, go to your main identity provider, try and log in, and then you'll use this QR code to scan. So something that maybe like walks them through the first time when I'm not able to be there, because I'd love to be there for every time. But like I said, just for the few people that like, they've been blind to essentially everything, and this is their first steps on it.
All right, live product feedback. We appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Always good to hear.
There's a follow-on to that question, and I'll pose this towards Jason, and that is, what are some of the common pitfalls that organizations face when deploying, any authentication solution, and are there things that you do or try to put in place to help them avoid those pitfalls?
Well, I think one of the pitfalls could be related to Alexander's follow-up question too. So, and since Jason
sure,
with customers, I'll let him answer that in the same one.
Yeah, happy to. So, I mean, yeah, obviously you're always going to have those fringe cases like Miguel mentioned, right? And when you're adopting a new technology, it really comes out of communication and making sure that everyone's aware, right? So we spend a lot of time making sure that the companies that we're talking with about these new processes or changes, there's multiple touch points and things that make it, as simple as possible. But I think a couple of things that we already did touch on slightly. One is that policy side, right? So making sure that just because you put something in place, I mean, I talk about this with outside of just like from an application perspective, but hey, if you're making a change to a system that, is kind of integral to what you do on a day-to-day basis, let's make sure that we've got buy-in from everyone, and not only that change is happening, but what the expectations are after we make those changes. So we like to make sure we communicate, hey, now that we have TraitWare in place, if you need to reset this, you're going to have to go through a little different process than you maybe did before when you just called in and said, hey, I need you to reset my password. And you go into Active Directory and you just say, oh, this account's locked. Okay, we're going to unlock it. And here's your new password, Mr. Customer. Like, you just can't do that today. So I think that's one thing. I mean, there's a responsibility, kind of a shared responsibility between the client, the technology provider, and the solution provider that is bringing that to the table to make sure that those things all work together. And then the other one would be ensuring that what they have in place today is going to be supported. So, and I say that because we had an incident come up with a client that we were helping. They're in the healthcare space, and they're migrating to Epic EMR from EMDs, and they have some legacy technology, that they're still using, and they were down a path of looking at a badge scan identity provider that's fairly well known, and they had a very large project in front of them to do that. And when we looked at it, first thing I asked was, well, how do you guys allow the authentication to actually pass through to the other system? And what we found was that they weren't really there yet. And so this client was looking at spending over $50,000 to put in this badge system that wasn't actually going to help them achieve their goal, which was just a seamless authentication into the Epic EMR. And so what we actually ended up doing was putting them on TraitWare, saved them tens of thousands of dollars from an implementation perspective. And now we can move them to that modern authentication. It ended up being an issue with the Citrix receivers on the third party side. But now we know that we can move in that way. And so I think just assessing the existing environment, making sure that the interoperability of some of these modern authentication systems are going to enable you to have that, because there's nothing worse than going through a project, putting something awesome in place, and then having people go, oh, but this doesn't work. So do your homework, make sure you're assessing, what you're using today. If you aren't sure what that looks like and you need someone to help you do that, we're happy to help. And we've found that often in doing that, we can look and kind of do an overhaul of what, other systems are being done, and do some consolidation. And to answer Alexander's question, is it expensive for a small firm? I mean, I think that's, obviously anyone may have a different opinion on it, but I know that the price for TraitWare is, a few dollars. I think a cup of coffee a month would be the way that we typically look at it. So if your identity is worth a cup of Starbucks every month for your company, which I would argue that it is, because it's going to cost way more than that if you look at what ransomware and breaches cost companies. So if you can buy your employees a cup of coffee per month, then you could afford Passwordless MFA for any size firm.
The only other thing I'll add to that, the cost-wise, is, and Jason, you can probably back this up, is most of the customers that we have and that you've deployed this to, because it's a critical control for things like a FTC safeguards rule, or to meet a minimum requirement for cyber insurance. On the cyber insurance side, you can usually see the ability to get a cyber insurance policy because you may not be able to get one if you don't have strong MFA in place, and B, a much better priced premium rate by using better phishing resistant controls. So Alexandra, there is a total cost of ownership calculator on our website you can go use, and then beyond that, happy to connect you to partners that sell cyber insurance, and a lot of businesses are having to implement that today, even to get other contracts for supply chain or whatever else it is. It more than pays for itself by moving to modern auth to reduce your insurance premiums.
Yeah, I heard a couple things there. First of all, it's not more than a Starbucks coffee per month. Also, it reduces deployment costs, Jason, to your point, and could also have the additional benefit of lowering insurance premiums for cyber insurance. So there's many ways that putting a solution like TraitWare in place can actually reduce costs. The ROI story is quite compelling. All right, we're almost out of time. I just want to ask everyone if there are any final thoughts that you'd like to share, any topics that we didn't expand upon as much as you'd like.
Miguel or Jason, you got final thoughts or things that, I mean, we already got feedback.
I think no. I think it's been a great conversation. You know, we started to touch some things on the end there that are important to us at Intersectus. So you started talking about cyber liability insurance and some of the evolution of that and what has caused the industry to really focus on the identity side of things in addition to overall security. And so I think anyone that's looking at, hey, we have a cyber insurance renewal coming up, please make sure you're talking with someone that understands your technology and understands insurance requirements, because there are a lot of things out there that people just don't know. And we hate seeing cases where people have answered a questionnaire incorrectly and then they have an issue when they make a claim, or worse than that, they have a policy, they answered it correctly, but they didn't understand they had sublimits. And so now they're faced with some sort of a breach or an incident that happens, and now they're not getting the same amount of money back from their carrier. So all of those things to say, the compliance aspect of how policies are underwritten and how the security impacts that, it absolutely goes into that total cost of ownership, like Keith was saying. And so just highly recommend people consider that, especially as we get to the end of the year and we're doing some 2025 planning as organizations. Make sure you keep that in the back of your mind for your insurance renewal.
Yeah, my final thoughts are is if you're listening to this today live or in the future, and you're curious about any of these things and you just want, some free consultation, right? No sales pitch, no nothing else, reach out to Jason at Intersectus or any of our other MSP partners, but Jason and Miguel do an amazing job. I'm sure Jason would make 15, 20 minutes of his time to answer your questions. And it'll end up being you'll want to know more, so you'll spend more time with him. And he's got the right relationships also for those cyber insurance things that you need to know about. And back to Alexandra's question of small firms desperately need to implement things like this. A scary or sad statistic is that 60% of SMBs and even SMEs fail after a single cyber incident just because they can't survive it. They have to do a restructure or whatever else it is. So, for that, cup of coffee a month per user, your identity is the #1 attack vector that they will go through. It is not the only control that you need to implement, but it's the first one you need to implement. And you need to start with your business email. For most businesses today, that's either on Office 365 or on Google Workspace. And you should be using business grade tools for those. Don't be using Gmail by itself. If you're a business, get a real Google Workspace account because the security is better. And then you can use tools like TraitWare to sit in front of it. But if you need help with that, don't hesitate on asking for it and reach out to people like Jason and Miguel.
Thanks, Heath. No, that's a great point. And we'd absolutely be happy to help anyone that has questions or wants to dive more into what it looks like to better improve their identity security, their email security, our goal is just to help companies stay secure. I always like to tell people that I help business owners sleep at night, right? So like that's what we do. We want to make sure that people can rest as easy as possible in what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, because it is definitely a scary world out there. And as we can see from this Rockstar report, a lot of these latest techniques, they're very sophisticated, and so even people that are extremely seasoned will be confused by that. So making sure we have things in place that don't allow that to turn into a major incident is super, super important. And anyone that wants to learn more about that, we'd be happy to talk with.
Helping our clients and friends sleep at night. That's to some degree what all 5 of us in this room right now are here to do. Jason, Miguel, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate your time. Keith and Chris, as always, very illuminating conversation. And audience, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. As a reminder, this show is recorded and will be available on LinkedIn and on our YouTube channel. Please feel free to share with your networks and help us keep the conversation going. And have a great holiday. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Everybody.
Cheers. Bye-bye.